The lace on my wedding dress felt softer than I imagined, delicate, almost fragile, a strange contrast to the way my heart was pounding beneath it. The mirror reflected a woman who looked calm, radiant even, but if anyone looked close enough, they'd see the truth in my eyes. The kind of stillness that comes only after surviving a storm. The morning sun slipped through the tall windows of the bridal suite, catching the glint of my engagement ring, a symbol of everything I built for myself. My phone buzzed on the vanity screen, lighting up with my father's name. I didn't have to open the message. I already knew what it said. "Have you changed your mind about inviting your sister?" The same sentence he'd repeated for weeks, as if guilt could rewrite betrayal. My throat tightened. I could still remember her face, my sister, Emily, laughing with my ex-fiancé, Tyler, the day I found out about them. That memory had teeth. I glanced at my reflection again, adjusted the silk strap on my shoulder, and exhaled. My makeup artist called from the next room, asking if I was ready. I was, but not in the way she thought. Today wasn't about revenge or even forgiveness. It was about peace. About choosing who deserved a seat in my life and who didn't. So when I picked up my phone, I didn't hesitate. I simply typed back, "No, Dad. I chose someone else." 2 years ago, I thought my life was finally aligning. Tyler and I had been together for 3 years. He was charming, dependable, the kind of man who opened car doors and remembered your coffee order. My sister, Emily, was my best friend. We'd grown up inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and stealing each other's clothes. If anyone had told me she'd be the one to betray me, I would have laughed. It was a Tuesday evening when everything changed. I was working late, finalizing a marketing pitch, when my phone buzzed with a notification, a photo from a mutual friend's story. Emily's unmistakable laugh. Tyler's arm around her waist. A wine glass in his hand. Their smiles too intimate to mistake for innocent. My stomach dropped before my mind could even catch up. I drove to his apartment, the air thick with disbelief. When I knocked, Emily opened the door, wearing one of his shirts. My world collapsed in a single heartbeat. Tyler tried to explain. Emily cried. I stood there, silent, tasting salt and iron in my mouth, my hands trembling so hard I could barely hold my purse. The next morning, my father called. His voice was calm, almost annoyed. "Sweetheart, mistakes happen. Your sister feels terrible. Don't throw family away over a man." Family. That word stung more than the betrayal itself. It meant that once again, Emily's comfort mattered more than my pain. I packed my bags that night. As I zipped the last suitcase, my grandmother's locket slipped from the dresser, a small gold heart engraved with "Stay true, even if you stand alone." I clutched it like a lifeline. When I walked out of that house, no one stopped me. Not even my father. The night air was cold, but it felt honest, the first real thing I'd felt in months. I remember whispering to myself, if they won't protect my heart, I will. And that's exactly what I did. Starting over was harder than I ever imagined. I moved to Chicago with 2 suitcases, a stack of unpaid bills, and the locket that never left my neck. I rented a studio apartment barely big enough for a bed and a coffee table. The first night, I cried until dawn, not because I missed them, but because I didn't recognize the sound of my own silence. My first job was at a small advertising firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous. I was an assistant, fetching coffee and proofreading copy no one read twice. But I showed up early, stayed late, and learned everything I could. The creative director, a woman named Monica Reyes, noticed. She was the kind of woman who spoke in clipped sentences and wore confidence, like perfume. One night, as I was closing my laptop, she stopped me and said, "You've got good instincts, Harper. Don't waste them trying to please small minds." That sentence stuck. Maybe because it reminded me of my grandmother's words, "Stay true, even if you stand alone." So, I stopped shrinking myself. I started pitching ideas, taking risks, and fighting for the kind of projects I wanted to do. When the firm's biggest client needed a rebrand, I volunteered. Monica let me lead it. I worked on it every night, living off takeout and caffeine, my fingers stained with highlighter ink. When that campaign launched, it went viral. The client sales tripled, and my name was suddenly in meetings I'd never been invited to before. Within a year, I wasn't an assistant anymore. I was a creative strategist, running my own small team. I could have told my family. I could have sent them pictures of the office view or the awards my team won. But I didn't. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted peace. I knew if I let them back in too soon, they'd twist it into something smaller, something that made sense to them. Instead, I posted quiet snapshots, a coffee cup, a city skyline, a caption that said grateful for growth. They assumed I was just getting by. Let them. I built my life brick by brick, one boundary at a time. And when I met Ryan, kind, grounded, everything Tyler wasn't, I didn't need to prove anything. He loved me for the woman I'd become, not the one I was trying to be. When he proposed last spring, I looked down at the diamond ring on my finger and thought, this is what it feels like to choose right, starting with myself. The morning of the rehearsal dinner, the air outside the lakeside venue felt crisp, like it had been washed clean overnight. Everything was in place. The soft blush flowers, the string lights above the terrace, the name cards written in delicate gold ink. It was exactly how I'd imagined it. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dad. I'll only come if Emily is invited. She's your sister, Harper. Families should be together on your big day. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that familiar ache rise in my chest. He hadn't asked how I'd been in years, not about my career, my engagement, or the life I built from ashes. But this he cared about. Keeping up the illusion of a perfect family. Ryan walked in then, adjusting his tie, his expression soft when he saw my face. Another guilt text, he asked. I nodded. He still doesn't get it. Ryan came behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. You don't owe them an invitation, Harper. This day is yours, no one else's. His steadiness grounded me. That's what I loved most about him. He never tried to fix my pain, just made space for it. When the guests arrived that evening, I watched my father step out of his car alone. His gray suit was pressed, his jaw tight with disapproval. I walked up to greet him, my heels clicking against the stone pathway, my posture calm but unyielding. Harper, he said, his voice low. So you really went through with this? I did, I replied. And I'm glad you came. His eyes swept over the venue, the elegance, the quiet luxury that whispered rather than shouted. This is impressive, he muttered. It should be, I said softly. I paid for all of it myself. He blinked, clearly surprised. You did. I smiled, a small one that didn't quite reach my eyes. Every cent. I own a firm now, Reyes and Lane. Maybe you've heard of it. I watched realization flicker across his face, confusion giving way to something else. Pride, maybe shame. Harper, I didn't know. Of course you didn't. I cut in gently. You never asked. Just then, the click of heels echoed behind us. I turned, and there she was, Emily, my sister, uninvited, standing in a soft lavender dress, clutching a small purse like it might protect her. My stomach tightened, but my expression didn't waver. Harper, she breathed, her voice trembling. I just wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry. The crowd hushed, sensing the tension. My father looked between us, silently pleading with his eyes. I walked closer until we stood a few feet apart. I could smell her perfume, the same scent she used to borrow from me when we were younger. I forgave you a long time ago, Emily, I said quietly. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Her eyes filled with tears. I was lost back then. I didn't mean to ruin everything. You didn't ruin everything, I said, steady. You just made room for me to rebuild differently. The silence that followed was heavy, but freeing. I looked at my father one last time. You told me to invite family. So I did. The people who actually stood by me when I had nothing. The ones who didn't make me choose between loyalty and self-respect. He didn't respond. He just lowered his gaze, the same way he did the night I walked out years ago. Later, when the music started and laughter filled the air, I stood on the terrace beside Ryan, watching the lights dance across the water. My father sat at a corner table, quiet, contemplative. Emily had left without a word. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed their approval to feel whole. The next morning, the lake shimmered under the early sun, calm and endless. I stood barefoot on the balcony of our suite, a cup of coffee warming my hands. Down below, the staff was already setting up for the ceremony. White chairs lined neatly, rose petals sprinkled like soft confetti across the aisle. Everything was quiet, except for the faint hum of the world beginning again. A knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, my father stood there, no suit, no mask of authority, just a man who suddenly looked much older than I remembered. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, stepping aside. He sat on the edge of the couch, his eyes fixed on the carpet. "I didn't realize how much I'd missed," he said finally. "How much you've done without us." I sipped my coffee, letting the silence stretch. "You didn't want to realize it, Dad." It was easier to believe I was still that broken girl who left home. He looked up at me then, his voice cracking. "You're right. I was wrong to protect Emily that way. I just couldn't bear to lose another daughter after your mother died. But I see now. I lost you anyway." For a moment, his honesty softened something inside me. But I wasn't the same daughter he could reason with anymore. "I don't hate Emily," I said quietly. "But I can't have her in my life until she owns what she did, really owns it. Not tears, not excuses. Accountability." He nodded slowly. "And me? You?" I set my cup down and met his eyes. "If you want to be part of my life, you start by respecting my boundaries. No more guilt, no more pretending things didn't happen. If you can do that, we'll try." He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "And if I can't, then this is where we say goodbye," I said gently. "And I'll wish you peace." Tears filled his eyes, the kind I'd waited my whole life to see. "You sound just like your mother," he murmured. I smiled faintly. "She taught me well. Stay true, even if you stand alone." He stood up, walked to the door, then turned. "For what it's worth, Harper, I'm proud of you. You did what I never had the courage to do." After he left, I sat for a long while, letting the weight of the conversation settle. I didn't feel angry or triumphant, just clear. That evening, as I prepared to walk down the aisle, I asked the coordinator to place a single empty chair near the front, not for Emily, not for my father, but for the version of me who survived them both. As I looked out over the guests, my chosen family, I realized this wasn't about revenge or validation. It was about balance. I'd set the conditions not to punish anyone, but to protect the peace I fought so hard to earn. The ceremony began just as the sun dipped behind the trees, turning the lake into a mirror of gold and rose. A gentle breeze lifted my veil, brushing against my shoulders like a whisper from the past, not haunting, just soft, forgiving. Ryan stood at the end of the aisle, his smile steady, patient. As I walked toward him, I caught glimpses of the people who had become my real family. Monica in the second row, tears glinting on her cheeks, my closest friends from the firm, beaming with pride, even my elderly neighbor from Chicago, waving like a proud aunt. These were my people. The ones who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be. The ceremony itself felt surreal. The vows, the laughter, the applause, a symphony of closure and new beginnings. When Ryan slipped the ring on my finger, I felt the world finally fall into place. Not perfect, but peaceful. Afterward, as the guests danced and music filled the air, I stepped away for a moment. The sky was deep lavender now, and the lake shimmered under 1,000 tiny lights. I reached for my grandmother's locket, the one I'd worn tucked beneath my dress all day. Opening it, I traced my thumb over the engraving. "Stay true, even if you stand alone." For the first time, those words didn't feel like a warning, they felt like a blessing. Behind me, I heard footsteps. My father. He didn't say anything, just handed me a small envelope. "From Emily," he said. "She wanted you to have this." Inside was a simple note, written in her familiar cursive. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do it again. Maybe someday, we can start over. Love, M." I folded it gently, tucked it beside the locket, and whispered, "Maybe someday." When I returned to the dance floor, Ryan reached for my hand. We swayed beneath the twinkling lights, laughter echoing around us. For a fleeting second, I saw my reflection in the glass, the same woman from that first mirror, but changed.
Softer.
Stronger. Whole. As the night wound down and the final song faded, I looked toward the empty chair I'd left near the front, a quiet tribute to every version of me that had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and silence. I smiled, lifting my glass in a silent toast. "To family," I whispered. "The kind we choose and the kind we outgrow." Then, with a steady breath and a heart finally free, I walked into the rest of my life. They said family is forever. Maybe that's true, but so is self-respect. Bottom of form.